This is the Tapped In Podcast, the podcast for beverage distributors that want to empower their sales team to drive business results. Listen up and welcome back to another episode of the Tapped In Sales Podcast. I'm your co-host, Bud, here with Moneyball Ross, and he is going to earn that title today. And Data Mike was also going to be a bit of the student today, I think, as well. But also just playing a role as a student, because today we are going to get into some Professor Ross territory and some real hard-hitting economics. And something that has been kind of burning a hole in our stomach a little bit, right, boys? Maybe creating a little bit of ulcer here and there. And this whole concept of supplier discounts, or what happens when a supplier brings a discount to you. You crushed it, you lost money, you wouldn't put more money in your bank account at the end of it, and the truth about discounts in beverage alcohol. And this is something that the industry has been doing for years and years and years. We'll continue to do it post this podcast as well for years and years and years. But we want to take some time to talk about the outcomes and the mathematics around the pricing and the discounting. And for those of us, whether you're a sales rep in the field listening, or whether you're a team lead or a senior leadership, like, this is for you, because this is good, hard, general knowledge for you to understand around what's going on in the market with pricing. So with that, we wanted to kick it off with a little bit of a clip.
Unfortunately, no one can be told what the matrix is. You have to see it for yourself. This is your last chance. After this, there is no turning back. You take the blue pill, the story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to believe. You take the red pill, you stay in Wonderland, and I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes. Remember, all I'm offering is the truth, nothing more. Follow me.
So, Ross, we have taken the red pill. We are ready to rock.
This is everybody's last chance. After what I show you, you can't unsee this.
Yeah.
And I'm only offering the truth.
So good. Such a fun part of the movie. I'm gonna have to rewatch them now.
It's such a fantastic movie.
The best. Well, Ross, where do you want to begin with this, my man?
All right. So what we're doing today is price elasticity. Now, this is something I was pretty interested in 10, 15 years ago, especially as it pertains to our industry. Again, I don't think, or what we're going to show you is, like I said, just the truth, right? And you may not like what it shows. And what's more disturbing is there's not much you can do about it. So this is a good one to share, I think. And this is a great one for people to look at and see and understand. I think this is going to be very illuminating. But again, this is your last chance to walk away. From here we go.
We need big numbies. We need numbies. Don't leave. Stay.
From here we go down the rabbit hole. So I'll give it a few seconds for anybody to depart that wants to depart here. All right. Price elasticity. Now, what surprises me a lot about this is it's not talked about a lot. And Bud, you got your MBA, right?
Yeah.
Did they talk about price elasticity?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, you talked about it? Okay.
Oh, yeah. I walked out of a microeconomics class because I was just like, I was sitting in the back of the class, and they used this dumb online training platform. It was before online training was. And I'd already done like micro 1 and macro 1. And then I didn't want to do micro 2 but I got into it and I sat in the back, and we got about 15 minutes in, and the professor turns up to this online training platform, which I hated. And I stood up and I walked out, and she said, "Where are you going? The class has just started." I said, "This ain't for me." The front door. But yeah, we spent a lot of time talking about this in my school.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I feel like it's talked about a lot more in economics because it's more theoretical. It does come up in business side, but usually it's tactical around pricing strategy. So if you're not signed up for this pricing strategy class, you may not touch this if you're on the this typical business path. But price elasticity is simply a function of if we move the price by what, X, how much does demand move, right? So in theory, let's say we drop the price by 20% and we see a 20% lift in demand, that has a price elasticity of 1. So it's responding 1-to-1 correlation with the movement in the price. So anything more than 1 is what we call sensitive or price elastic. In other words, it responds more to the movement in price than it does the change in the demand moves more than the change in the price. And vice versa, if we drop the price and the demand doesn't move as much, it's inelastic, right? Think about, there's certain goods that you can think of in the market that don't respond as much to price and those that do, right? When things go on sale, what they're trying to do is stoke additional demand. And
good example is gasoline.
Yeah.
Like we don't, gasoline is inelastic, right, Ross? We don't jump in our car and drive more or go on a bigger and bigger ever turning road trips if gas goes on sale by 10 cents a gallon. It doesn't change our behavior with gas that much.
I mean, I would say on the margin, it is somewhat elastic, right? So you may second guess that summer vacation, that it does start to respond, but to a lesser degree. To your point, I mean, everybody's got to commute to the office, everybody's got to drive to their accounts, so it's less responsive.
So if you go to Target and cutlery is on sale, or if dishes are on sale by 20 or 30%, that's going to maybe be something that's going to drive more demand and have a bigger change in demand based on pricing versus something like gas or utilities or anything else.
Yeah, something that's more of an impulse buy. Those things that find their way to the end caps, those sort of things, those things that we put on the counter at the shelf or at the checkout, things that are impulse, they tend to be a little bit more driven by price sensitivity, right? So I think as it relates to what we're talking about here today, we need to then overlay that price sensitivity and that demand sensitivity and how it impacts our margins as a distributor. And we as a company in the space, we're not a database mining company, but we do provide certain tools that allow you to start to see this. And also there's ground up sales rep driven vision on this too, as they start to see the margin impact and the volume impact of these discounts. So to kind of illustrate this, I'm going to pull up kind of a worksheet and I'm going to do my best to talk through it so that those that aren't seeing this can, hear and understand what we're saying. But I am going to bring up a little worksheet to kind of help us model this. And I'll take it slow, so make sure that everybody that's just listening can kind of follow along with what we're doing.
Even me? Will I be able to keep up too, Ross?
That's the goal.
You're going to have to take it real slow.
Mike's going to do great. I think he's going to get an A, Ross.
We'll see. We'll grade him at the end.
I didn't know there was a test at the end.
Well, now you know. All right. So going back to the core definition again. So I already touched on it, but again, it's a calculation or a function of the percent change in quantity demanded divided by the percent change in price. So how much is the price changing as a function, or sorry, how much is the demand changing as a function of the price change? Again, anything greater than 1 is sensitive. Anything less than 1 is insensitive. So the general prevailing theory here is that in our space, products tend to be elastic, right? Otherwise, why would you discount? The reason you discount is in order to drive additional incremental demand. So let's model this out. What I've done here is created a table, a hypothetical table of a supplier-distributor relationship. And I think we need to be aware of the fact that the margins at the supplier and the distributor are not the same, right? So at the distributor, we all know our margins range from 20 to 28, maybe 30%. That's kind of our range. That's kind of where we live. So I've made the assumption of just plugging in 25%. Our suppliers also range in their margins. If you look up, for example, AB InBev or Molson Coors margins, they sit in the range of 40 to 55%, depending on the region. So I went ahead and just took 50%. Now, we could probably play with that and say maybe it's closer to 45 in North America, maybe it's closer to 55% globally, and it depends based on the supplier. So, and it depends on the mix of products being sold and how much is premium versus sub-premium versus volume. So let's just leave it at 50% and call that good for the sake of this tool or this analysis. So what I've done is I've created a hypothetical package, a product, and we're selling it to retail for about $33. So that should put us in a kind of a normal range, right? What that means is we move backwards is we bought it for $25. So we've got a gross profit of about $8 a case. Let's assume that this is just a full in case equivalent, right? 4, 6, 12. So let's assume a case equivalent. So unit and case, same as far as this conversation is concerned. So we buy it from the supplier at $25. What that means is for the supplier themselves, their cost of goods is about $12.50. So the supplier costs $12.50 to produce this package. They then sell it to us at the distributor for $25. We then sell it to the retailer at $33. So $8 in GP per case generated. So moving down the line here, what I've done is I've created a table that allows us to play with some assumptions. Just for ease of math, let's just assume we sell about 1,000 cases of this product per month. So not a huge supplier, but our product, but something reasonable that we can kind of realistically put our brains around. Price to our retailers, $33. What I've done is I've set this up with a $5 discount. And we're going to split that 50-50 with our supplier. So as you're looking at the sheet, we've got that $33. We've got a discount of $5, and we're each contributing $2.50 to bring that down by $5. Now, what I've done is calculated out what that is in terms of price change, because we can basically see that. So that's going to reflect a 15% price change. We can then play with what the demand change is. So let's assume for a second that the demand changes by 25%. So we reduced the price by 15, and we saw a 25% change in the demand. Cool. That seems pretty reasonable. Seems like a good deal, right? And that gives us a price elasticity of 1.65. So elastic, and it's generating additional sales for us. On the surface, you may look at that and say, well, that's a good deal. I only changed the price 15%, and I got 25% more sales. We should do that all day, every day. Not so fast. So as I come down below, we need to then put this through the financial lens. So what I've done is I've created 2 lines, one for us and one for our supplier, because it's important to realize that this calculation is different for the 2 of us. And I'm going to show kind of how that looks. So as the wholesaler line, again, we had $8 of GP per case. Our new GP per case is $5.50. So that reflects our portion of the discount. That takes our margin down to 18%. So if we assume 1,000 cases normally and our normal GP of $8, we would have made $8,000. If we increase sales by 25% per the assumption we made, and we multiply that times the new GP per case of $5.50, that gets us $6,875. So you'll see we lost more than $1,000 in opportunity cost here. So on the surface, even though we increased our sales by 25% and only discounted 15%, plus our percentage of that discount was only half, it's not worth it for us. We would have made more money had we not made the discount. So I'm going to stop there, because that might be a little surprising, right?
Yeah, I mean, through the lens of usually sell more beer, make more money, right? More beer we sell, the more money we make. Discount it, sell more volume, and it's going to equal more dollars. So in this case, in this scenario, it's not, right?
But it is for somebody. So let's talk about the supplier. So their normal profit, as I mentioned, was $12.50. So that's half their cost to us minus their cost of goods to produce, $12.50. So, but they're coming up with half the discount. So very generous of them, right? 50-50 with us. That takes their GP per case down to $10 and their margin down to 44.4. So the original calculation was 1,000 cases times 12.50 is $12,500. But you'll see here that by taking that discount, their dollar amount generated is exactly the same. So it's 12,500. So for them, anything beyond 25% change in demand is money good. For you, it's not.
There's also some of the economics around brewery economics and that they're a production facility. And if they grow their production, they can lower their input costs, thus growing their margin on the back end just by becoming a bigger economies of scale too.
Yeah, there's a lot of mathematics going on behind the scenes at the supplier that you can't see around utilization, plant utilization, price breaks on raw materials. There's a lot of different other things happening there that they can do to help juice their margins beyond just the GP calculation here, right? I think that's a good call out, Bud. And I think, probably beyond the scope of how we need to look at it as a distributor, but know that they're looking at ways to juice their profitability, and that's cost control, input cost control, and labor and factory utilization or plant utilization time. Okay, so let's play with some of the assumptions. So I just took the percent change in demand up to 26 and made it richer. Now at this point, anything higher is still money good for the supplier, right? As we continue to move up, let's move to 30%. Oops, not 300. So now I've moved the demand change to 30%. We still have an original GP of 8 and a generation now of 7150. So we're still not in the good. So how long does it take before this thing starts to make sense for us? I take it to 40%. We're still not money good. We're at 8,000 original, 7,700. 45%, still not there. How about 50%? Now we're money good by $250. So in order for this discount to make any sense for us, the distributor, a 15% discount shared 50-50, we need to increase sales by 50%. This is the red pill, so to speak. Because if you're sitting there and thinking about it, how many promotions or discounts do we do that yield us over 50% change in demand, especially on a large base? Not a lot.
Yeah, not a lot. And, we were talking about how elastic is the industry in beer. I mean, it's not a detergent, right? I mean, a 50-cent discount or a $2 discount is not going to make somebody drop their go-to brand and start buying that brand long term. I mean, it's a very short term. Yeah, it's on sale. I'll pick it up. I'll drink it because it's on sale. We're not getting a whole lot of long term growth out of it for the discounts. Am I wrong in that assumption?
Yeah, I think that, how much brand loyalty long term are you creating? I guess, is that the question you're asking? And
yeah, exactly. Like where? Okay. So I've increased my sales by 50% for this 15% discount to just basically break even, and that break even cost. I mean, you're not even factoring in the extra work. right? I don't even think we made it to that point. We've just broke even to what you said we made $250 here. We're not talking about all the extra work, all the extra labor that went into those increased sales by 50%. Warehousing, trucks, warehouse people building it, right? Merchandisers merchandising it, sales reps moving it in, moving it out, building it, whatever we need to do as far as displays go. There's a lot of work that went into that for $250.
And I think it's worse than that too. So I think that you're talking about other factors that are beyond the scope of the math that we're looking at.
Yeah.
And I often think about, well, what are you trading from to?
Exactly. And that was on my neck. I mean, are we cannibalizing a package that is more profitable? Where did this consumer come from? Did it come 100%? Did all 50% of the growth come from competition? Cool. If so, that's a win. Did some of it come from a more profitable, non-discounted package? That's not a win.
I mean, maybe you're not buying cereal this week for your kids because you'd rather buy that Corona on discount, but I don't think that's happening.
Is that wrong? Should I not be doing that?
They don't need
Is that
cereal.
frowned upon?
They don't.
Should I not be doing that?
They don't need cereal. It's got dyes in it anyway. Who cares?
Yeah, exactly.
Ross, the question I've got is, we're talking about 1,000 cases a month, 1,500 cases a month, small brand, no brand to bat an eye at here. Does this change at all at scale at a larger brand? Does it get better, get worse, or just kind of magnitude size itself out the same way?
Well, I mean, it gets worse in terms of the financial impact. If it doesn't pencil out, it won't pencil out at scale. If it doesn't pencil out small size, it won't pencil out at a large size. So you're doing more damage to yourself if you do this at scale. And I think continuing the conversation of where Mike was, the other thing too is you're assuming that your competitor is not going to follow you, and often they do. So now any advantage you got around that price decrease and price and demand change is watered down, and now you and your competitive distributor are both eating it, so to speak. So there's externalities out here that are beyond the calculation. I'm going to go into some more of those too, but I think it's important to realize that it's not cut and dry, and it's you can't sit here and run this calculation and have it play out in the real world exactly as it looks on this spreadsheet here.
What are those other externalities?
So I think the game theory comes into play, right? In terms of what your competitor is going to do and what the consumer is going to do. Is the consumer going to drink more alcohol simply because things are on sale? No, they'll probably gravitate towards your product. But I think Mike said the right thing, which is, what are they leaving? What if they're leaving something that's higher profit? What if they're leaving Stella to buy something else, because it's on discount?
Yeah, or even within the same brand family, a non-discounted package. Are they leaving an 18 for a loose can, or are they leaving a loose can for an 18, vice versa? What's more profitable? Where is that growth coming from, right? Where are we getting that consumer? And generally they're going to stay within the same brand for the most part, if they're loyal. And like I said before, if we get somebody that jumps brands and comes over just because of the pricing, they're not there for long. They're there for that discount, and they're not coming back, unfortunately.
So let's finish this spreadsheet so we can move back to this normal screen here. There's one more thing that I want to touch on while we have this open, and it's the idea that the supplier comes in and says, okay, cool, I will concede that my margins are larger than yours. Now that's a fun conversation. Good luck getting your DM to have it with you. But let's assume for a second that your DM knows that you care and you're knowledgeable. They come in and say, well, cool, I will take on 70, right? Because that's more in line with our margins. Now let's go back to that same 25%. So now we've flipped the script a little bit, haven't we? So now at that same 25%, we're money good, they're not.
just below 30 gets you flat, right? For both, gets you in the green for both.
Yeah, let's see if we go to 28%, 30%, 32.
Ooh, 34, 35,
There you go.
40.
40 gets you both in the green.
Wow. So it shaves 10% off the need for both to be positive.
So that's where a little bit of negotiation comes into play, right? If they're willing to take on a 70 share of the discount, it brings it more in line with your all's margins. You still got to get to 40% for both of you to be money good, but it does put more risk back on the supplier. So I don't want to make this all doom and gloom. I do want to give a glimmer of hope here that there is room within the share of the discount. Now, but it's been a while. How often are the discount heavily skewed towards the supplier covering more?
Most of the time it's 50-50. The
Yeah.
most nefarious ones are the price increase resends, where that's up 70-30 and back 50-50. Most of that racket has been cut out, though. But those are the most nefarious ones that play the worst outcomes for wholesalers, because that's a flat out margin grab.
Yeah, the price increase and resending used to drive me crazy.
Yep. But most of it is 50-50. The other kind of like you brought up, Ross, like the margin percentage for the wholesaler and the supplier. If you have a supplier in your book that's not bringing discounts to you, more than likely their discounting capacity is not enough. Like they don't have enough margin to do a discount capacity because they've already done the math and they realize that it's not going to move the needle that much for them, and it's not going to put more money in their back pocket. That's the piece of the puzzle we need to think about that you're bringing up is how is it going to put more money in our pocket at the end of the day? Because volume for volume's sake isn't driving the boat for anybody on the wholesaler side, but money for money's sake, profit for profit's sake will drive the boat. So how are we going to put more money in our back pocket? And when we used to sell Monster, this was the blended margin conversation we always had with our retailers of the sell Monster all day long for what, Mike? It was like $4, 2 for 3. And if you did $4, 2 for 3 with a shelf deal, we gave you a price discount on those items. It always worked though, because it grew velocity faster for the retailer and for us than not doing it. And it grew it at such a rate in which we all collectively put more money in our wallet. That's the smart discounting process. One of the other challenges with beverage alcohol brands is that they're so dang big. Like, how do you move the market on something that's Miller Lite or Busch Light or Bud Light or Ultra when they're already so big? That's the hard part.
Enough to make up for that margin loss.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Enough to make the revenue or the profit pool and the profit box bigger. If you put this on a chart and you move this around, you can actually see the profit box or the revenue box getting bigger and smaller depending on how your demand curve goes and how your outcomes look. Like you could graph this out and see them getting smaller and bigger and smaller and bigger. It's got to get bigger if you're going to do it in a wholesaler's view.
So there's an exercise that I went through around this, because what we did is we created a sheet that has one example, one product, and allows us to play with the discounts and see what we need to do. What I did, and I think that it's a worthwhile exercise, but I'm going to temper it with reality, is to look at prior discounts and see, and putting our statistics hat back on, if we've got 7 data points, we're statistically significant. So as long as we've got history of doing a discount at least 7 times, we can feel pretty confident. I mean, even at 5, you're probably okay. But you go back in time and you look at prior discounts and you look at the impact on sales. And you try to calculate out what the price elasticity is of that SKU. Right? So now position ourselves, we're sitting across the table from the DM, and now we're armed with a price elasticity number based on history of discounts. Right? We know that your product has a price elasticity of 1.5. And it needs to be 3 for this to make sense. Now, I'm going to temper that with simply looking at the change in price relative to the change in demand historically is going to have noise in it, right? Was it rainy as shit and cold for that holiday and it was a promo, it was a quick 1 week promo? Was that an impact? Did AB do some kind of marketing disaster that caused demand to actually drop that had nothing to do with the pricing, right? And then furthermore, when they did come in heavy with discounting, the response wasn't as strong in those couple months afterwards, right? Not strong enough to make any level of sense, but that's not what we were trying to do. We were trying to save the brand, right? So I think there's other factors that play into it, but the more data points you have, the better. And if you can get towards a number, great. And what you're going to find is something fairly depressing, which is a huge, vast majority of your discounts were not profitable. Now, you will find some weird, interesting ones at the tail that you would never expect that have high, very high elasticity that you wouldn't have thought of. And then potentially you have the ability to play with those and go to the supplier and say, hey, I show historically that if we change the price by 25%, we're going to get a 3x lift in sales. Should we do that? So you can start to actually be proactive around engaging a supplier around a discount armed with the data, say, hey, there's no guarantees in life, right? Except death and taxes. But here is what we know about historic sensitivity of your product or a very analogous product that's been discounted and yours hasn't, so that you can be proactive to use supplier money to drive it where it makes sense.
Absolutely. I think the ultimate takeaway, at least what I've been gathering so far, is have a plan, right? Most pricing decisions are made with hope, not math. And basically that's how we're going to lose profit, right? Money is going to walk out the back door without having a plan. So if you're dropping prices without a plan, you're really not competing. You're losing margin. I have some a real life scenario example that I could share. Obviously, this is anonymized. We're not going to name brands, suppliers, or clients, but just some data that I kind of stumbled across that caught me by surprise, and it's a prime example of what you're trying to say and your points that you're trying to get across. But I noticed that a particular brand, and I wouldn't say it's the largest, but it's also not something to shake a stick at. It comes with some pretty decent volume, but the for the month to date data was up 12.4% in volume, right? That's awesome. Actually, it was 500 cases for that 12.4% volume. So pretty good amount of cases when we're talking about that. That's a win typically, right? Everybody to go around and kind of cheer and maybe crack a beer, high five. Yeah, we're up 12.5%. We sold 500 extra cases. But that came at the expense of being down 15.5% in GP to the tune of like $5,200, $5,500, right? So when you're looking at that and you're saying, yeah, I grew this brand by 12.5%. We went out there, we discounted it, we got the extra growth that we wanted, we sold an extra 500 cases. Bottom line is it cost you over $5,000 to do that. So really, I mean, ultimately, like, who is the real winner there? And was that worth it? To me, that's not worth it to me when I'm looking at the books, right? I mean, if I think about it, I'm looking at scan data. Scan data is not putting money in the bank. That is not helping my bottom line, right? At all. My GP, my ledger is what's putting money in the bank. That's what I'm looking at. That's what's paying attention. So I did not go as deep as what you did, Ross. That was amazing. But I just started doing a little bit of math on the side of some discounting too, right? And basically saying, hey, if we have a $2 discount on a package that is $30 PTR, how many of those do I have to sell extra? How many extra cases do I have to sell to be able to make up for that $2 break? So a $30 case, say it's $8 in GP, right? So basically FOB of $22. We drop $2. So now we're making $6 per case GP versus the 8, right? And the math came out to 30.33 cases for every case you sold. Doesn't sound bad, but say you sell 1,000 cases, all right? GP before, say $8,000 on that. Now We've discounted $2,000 of that. So now we've made $6,000. To make that up, I have to sell an extra 333 cases. That seems like a lot to me. And that's just to break even. That's just to break even for that discount, not to throw in all those extra costs that we talked about before, right? With the labor, delivery, paying those people, all and even paying the rep and everybody else. So now it's like, all right, well, where was that break even if we add in all of that? And was it worth it? And is it worth it to do that? And I mean, that's just kind of what I wanted to add. I love everything you broke out there. That's really good. It's really insightful. And it comes down to, right, what are we doing to move the needle? And I guess that's our topic of this podcast every single week. What are we doing? What are we trying to accomplish here, right? To take the words right out of Ross's mouth. What are we trying to accomplish here? Sell more beer, look better on paper, or put more paper in the bank? And I think that's what it comes down to.
I like that. More paper in the bank.
More paper in the bank.
The put the supplier hat on for a minute, which I rarely do, but when I do it, I can do it. Market share. You brought up IRI data. The last most recent round of discounting involvement that I've been involved with either talking with clients about it and or before running the wholesaler, was all centered around market share, market share, market share. Don't think about the return on investment, but think about the market share. And like, that's what the suppliers are focused on. And how do you work with a supplier who's got that attitude around discounting? And the greatest example is, you've got a brand, top growth brand, one of the top brands in the country now, growing 10%, looking for a discount for the key summer selling season. Remember, it's already growing, it's already expanding velocity wise, it's already growing profit pool, looking for a discount. And the DM is saying, we need to do the discount because we need to expand our market share. How does that play out? Like, how do we focus on that or understand that? Or does that math start to stack up either on the back end too?
Well, I think we need to step back and understand the asymmetric relationship that we have with our suppliers.
Yeah.
For our suppliers, this is 100% of their business, right? These 10, 15 SKUs is 100% of what they do. For you, it might be 2% of what you do. So, Mike, you said, we're going after this, we're looking at this without any analysis or math. Well, a lot of your suppliers are. And to your point, Bud, what are they trying to achieve? And it could be a margin thing that they're trying to achieve on your back, or it could be, they're trying to grow the brand. But again, you have a diverse portfolio, and their growth a lot of times comes at the expense of other brands in your portfolio, which may or may not have different profitability, and pull through elements to them that you don't necessarily want to mess with. So I think it's important to realize that, putting your supplier hat on, Bud, that they may be thinking about this a lot more than you are. And I think it's important for you to, come to the table armed with what's in your best interest here.
Yeah.
I used to say I went to college. I slept through a lot of it, but I didn't sleep through econ.
And I mean, to add to that, right, there are going to be some supplier discounts that we just run with, and maybe our hand is forced a little bit harder. So what do we do with those discounts? How do we handle those discounts in the market, which we've talked about on many episodes, right? But a discount for without a display is basically a donation. If I'm doing any kind of discounting on any kind of package and I'm giving up margin, especially if I'm a rep and I'm paid on GP, that's just a donation. And what am I getting in return on my effort for this discount? If it's not displayed, am I getting something else? Am I going to be able to get that 5K stack of this high GP item that I've been asking for the last couple of weeks? Am I going to be able to get that location right at the counter for my impulse buy product? Am I going to be able to get something else in return, or am I just donating some GP and some margin to your account for the sake of? Because in some cases we're not even getting a price break on that discount as well.
What if we flip this around Mike and Ross. And one of the things that we work on with clients and reps in the field is comparing how one product is doing versus its cohort of other like products. And the questions we always teach a rep to ask is it pricing the same versus its cohort of product or a cohort of customers? Or is it in the right part of the store? Because those are two key components. Is it in the right location? It's probably very important. And is it priced right compared to its other cohort of customers? If you're a rep thinking about this, and now we've, leveled up the financial literacy around discounting, and we're thinking about it of how do I move the needle on this individual SKU in this account, and I'm working as a distributor rep to a retailer. Maybe this 6-pack is $1 more, or this 25-ounce can or 24-ounce can is anywhere between 40 to 80 cents more than its cohort of customers. Do I have that conversation with a retailer? Do I talk about this with a retailer? And how would you go about doing that if you were a distributor rep in the field or a team lead in the field, Ross?
Oh, I thought you were going to give that to Mike.
Well, we're going to start with you because you know the math. You got the math around it too.
No, I'm going to defer to Mike on this one.
There we go. Right.
Yeah, my instant answer is 100%. We have those conversations, and I've seen it happen in real time out in the market with reps and team leads. When we've discovered, obviously within the app of VXP, I can see what the rate of sales is versus the average account in the channel, whether we're dealing gas, convenience, packaged liquor, anything like that. I can see the average, and those are the conversations. I say this a lot. We don't want to share any of this data. We want to take that data and turn it into a story. And what is that story going to be? And in that case, in that scenario, absolutely. Hey, Mr. Retailer, this is your sales on this package versus accounts just like you, right? And I think that we can bring this volume up by having this priced correctly on the shelf, which will ultimately make you more money at the end of the day, right? And 100%. I think that conversation needs to happen. And I also think it's worth, you always hear me poo-poo and put the smackdown on discounts because they don't work. But I do think that I do want to make sure that I say that I think that they work in some cases, some scenarios, right? When we want to be the lowest price for a reason, because we will gain drinkers that will stick around. We will gain the volume, or we will gain the placement that we want. And I mean that, and my head goes directly to on-premise. And when I think about on-premise, there's not cooler space for all of these RTDs. There's typically one, sometimes two vodka-based sodas, maybe a vodka-based or a tequila-based soda, any of those lines, right? When we come to RTDs, maybe there's only a couple FMBs in the market or in the account. This is where I think discounting and pricing can really get you in the door to be that one, or maybe that two that has a lower price of the lead that's in there. And when we're trying to gain space like that, we're trying to become the leader in that category, in that account. I do think discounting and I do think that lower price will work, especially if that, and only if that price is reflected to the consumer.
I think
You brought up
I was gonna say that intuitively, I think as a rep, you know this, but I think it's also what we didn't talk about in my spreadsheet is the retail level. So there's another layer here of the 3-tier system. So Mike, what are the average margins a retailer makes?
Anywhere between 20 to 30, 35.
Okay. But you would say it's generally slightly higher than ours as a distributor.
Yeah. In some cases, in most cases, yeah.
In most cases.
Unless it's somebody that's running some hot prices. But yeah, in most cases, it's going to be higher.
So I think there's two things that a retailer can do that we can't do necessarily as a distributor. We can do a little bit of it, but one, their margin profile is different, just like our suppliers are. So discounting impacts them overall slightly differently. Second of all, they have a larger, more diverse portfolio than you do as a distributor. You represent maybe a third of the market, half the market, whatever it may be, but they have a full book portfolio that includes all the distributors that call on them, right? So they have a larger, more diverse portfolio. They have a third lever that you don't have, which is they have backstock. And a lot of our retailers will play games with loading up. And those discounts provide great opportunities to pull it in at the lower price. And then when you go up, just not buy it. So you get double hammered. Just because you're extending the discount period longer than you anticipated or you wanted to. And to your point, Mike, they may or may not pass that through. They may be just grabbing it for themselves. Mm-hmm. But I think it's important to realize as a rep, and I think is that your retailers have a separate economic calculation that they're going through that's different than yours.
And when we talked about this before, Mike, and this is more of a quantity discount discussion, we've drawn this chart before, but you've got profit, and here it is with no discount. When you do the discount, you're going to buy that profit down, and you got to find a way to move your velocity. You got to find a way to move your velocity back up so that you're above this line over time.
Absolutely.
And this is what happens at retail when you say a discount with no display, or a discount with no shelf activity, or a discount with no pricing reflection is a donation. That's the sad panda of the donation.
The sad panda.
Sad panda.
And it's a donation we can't write off at the end of the year.
Correct. Yes. Yes. For sure. Because that's what you want to have happen is you got to get above this. You got to get above this velocity line. And it's, the airplane example, you lose your engine, you push your nose over, you have no power to come back up. You won't get back up to that other level. And these are things that
kind of like what we saw in India this past week.
A little bit. Yeah. A little bit. And you can't, and you like, other things that are good examples, like if you're a Red Bull sales rep, or if you're doing lots of energy drink sales and you're working in a small convenience store channel or small format rep, and you're constantly focused around the deals and the one-offs that kind of flow in and out and the ebb and flow of a market like that, you have to be paying attention to your pricing on the shelf, because if you're being paid by revenue or you're being paid by profit, and you are not getting that pricing reflected, and you are not getting that display activity reflected, you are not squeezing the velocity that you need to squeeze out of that market, and you are stuck down here somewhere.
Well, I mean, this to me is the clearest example as to why you should be paying on profit, because you need the reps to understand the sad panda. Mm-hmm. And if you're selling on volume and you're selling just on displays and PODs, you're going to fall into the sad panda trap.
Yeah.
And 100% you will. And what I love is when the sales team bubbles up their own anger about it. And this happened when I was at my distributor, which was, you want your reps to come to you and say, that was a stupid discount. Why did you do that? There is no way in hell that I could sell enough volume to make up for that discount. Why did you do that? That's what you want to hear. Because at the end of the day, we've talked about this. You need vertical alignment. And at the end of the day, you need more paper in the bank. No, what'd you say, Mike? Paper in hand? Paper. A stack of fat bills? Or what'd you say? Did we lose Mike?
He's frozen right now. He's probably kicking the kids off of. He's probably booting the kids off of the bandwidth right now.
Streaming Guitar Hero or whatever.
If you're looking to learn more about some of the philosophies around quantity discounts and where you are leveraging QDs or not as a sales rep, some of your ideas, Mike, and some of the charting that we just talked about too. Episode 31, quantity discounts. Are you selling smarter or just more? Which was our kind of first blush at this as well. So go check out that episode if you're listening and enjoying that, this kind of mindset and this kind of idea. And then Ross, I think you had a question you wanted to ask too.
Yeah, I kicked all this off by saying that, once you see this, you can't unsee it. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that drove me crazy was when my suppliers would go and sell in a discount and just say, here it is. So I guess my question to you, Bud, is, what can we do as a distributor when a discount was pre-sold in?
Yeah. Well, we're independent business people. We can do what we want. That's
what it says on the paper, but what does it mean in real world?
So the challenge that you run into when that happens is, what are you going to hold up if you don't fall in the line, if you don't fall in, or you cross the picket line and you do your own thing? And a lot of times it's some kind of chain driven activity. So the suppliers are leveraging their connection with the chains through their key account managers and where they're selling to big chains and selling these discount activity in. And then they're coming to us and kind of hammering it down our throats on those, whatever those discounts are, whatever they may be or whatever timing they are. And if you put your foot down and you say no, there's going to be some kind of repercussion around a chain activity in some way, shape, or form. I remember getting a call from we did this on accident. I remember getting a call from a cam. It was like, hey, your discounting on aluminum bottles is wrong. And I'm like, I don't know what it's supposed to be. What is it supposed to be? And he's like, well, if you don't fix it, we're all going to be out of the 10 for 10 bin in whatever store we were talking about. I was like, I have no clue, bro, what we need to do or what we don't need to do. You did this without our approval or knowledge, and clearly we aren't following the bouncing ball. And that happens all the time. And some of the challenges is that how do you push back in the right way and still keep that relationship? And to me, it's always been centered around how do you use data and information to suck the hot air and the emotional out of the conversation, and that we're having a rational logical conversation around what are the outcomes that we want to get to and why are we here, which we're here to stack paper, as Mike liked to put it.
There it was, stacking paper.
Stack paper.
Stack
We're here
paper,
to stack
take it
paper
to the bank.
in this episode and in this business. But you are kind of stuck, Ross, like without being an absolute pain in the ass or being the dick in the room or just being the stick in the mud. You're kind of stuck right now.
And that's why I keyed it off with the red pill, right? It's you're almost better off being ignorant, because you can go through the analysis like I did and figure out, or kind of gauge what the price elasticity is in every one of your brands and SKUs. So cool. Now you can calculate how much money you're losing, and it just makes you sleep shittier at night. Because, I mean, a lot of the times I got boxed out of being able to do anything because the supplier had pre-sold in the chains.
Today's environment, the best thing you can do with it is recognize it, acknowledge the pros and cons of it, and limit as much of it as you can to the key strategic priorities that your supplier partners have, and cut out all the noise of the fringes after that. And because there are a lot of things that do happen that aren't that particularly key or aren't that particularly strategic. And we should just stay focused on what is key and what is strategic. And we lost Mike again. We might not get Mike back.
I don't know if we're going to get him back.
Dude. We'll see here. Oh, where is Mike? Well, another good episode. If you are interested in getting the sheet that we talked about today, and or want to talk more about this, or just want to call bullshit on what we talked about today too, we're totally cool with that. You can hit us up, info@vxptech.com. We lost the Mike. Mike will be back. He desperately is bargaining for a new computer for sure. So we will see how that goes out. Mike's negotiating for a new computer. Suppliers negotiating for discounts. So we'll see what happens. I love it. And we are going in here in the heat of the selling season. So good luck, everybody, during build week. And let's go sell some beer, and let's go get this industry back on its feet and keep moving. So cheers, Ross.